Hello, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Fire Away, Rudner Law's online employment law show answering the employment law questions that matter to you. My name is Stuart Rudner. I'm an employment lawyer and an employment mediator and your host of Fire Away. Reminder that Fire Away streams every month online. Past episodes are always available on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and on the Rudner Law website. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them. Feel free to either post about them on Facebook or YouTube, or tweet to @RudnerLaw. Our guest today is Mitch Kowalski. I've known Mitch for about 6 or 7 years. I love the bioinformation I was given. It's Mitch is many things. He's a lawyer, he's a legal services management consultant, and an author. His consulting services offer strategic advice to in-house legal department transformation and innovations that give law firms a competitive advantage. I've known Mitch for years because he talks about the evolution of the legal practice and the use of technology in the legal practice, which is something that obviously I care deeply about, and our firm uses technology to our advantage quite a bit, although there's a lot of things we could learn. But today, Mitch and I are going to be discussing legal technology, innovations at large, as well as how evolutions in the practice of law can impact employment law and HR, and how those of you in HR should be working with your employment lawyers as you go forward. So, Mitch, thanks for joining me today.
Great. Thanks for having me, Stuart.
I'm looking forward to the conversation. You and I have been talking for about 6 or 7 years, and just in that time, it's amazing to me how much things have changed. You're obviously far more in touch with it than I am. My life has changed. I've gone from working in a large national firm to working in a small partnership to working in a slightly smaller firm where I'm the only partner. So I've gone from about 300 partners to one partner to no partners. But over that time, the way that we practice has changed dramatically. And I like to think I'm a techie and someone who is often on the leading edge or sometimes the bleeding edge of technology. But there's probably a lot of stuff that I don't even know about. So let me start by asking you the fairly general question. What are the biggest innovative changes or practices that are now being implemented in law firms?
Well, let's just start with the why, right? I always like to start with why. Why, everybody jumps to innovation saying, okay, let's do something really innovative. And you see there is almost on a weekly or a monthly basis, new press releases coming out from some law firm about their innovation, head of innovation or innovation committee or innovation award or whatever. And it becomes really noisy and confusing if you listen to that, because it's just what you have to do now if you're a law firm is to say that you're innovative in some way. But really you have to look at why bother? And the reason why bother is that there are a number of waves of disruption coursing through the legal services market, right? So we're going through the great legal reformation is what I call it, which is also a shameless plug for my book. But why not? But really, look, we have a generational change where we have millennials and Generation Z coming up who are coming through the marketplace as both our clients and our employees, who are saying, wow, why are we doing things the way we're doing? Isn't there a different way to do it? We really like technology. Isn't there an app for this? Yeah. Why do I have to do things? I'm sure there's technology that can do that. So that is, driving some change. And law firms are looking at how do we retain that talent? Because if we're not meeting the needs of our employees as a law firm, they tend to leave. And we are starting to see that. We're seeing that millennials in particular aren't that enthralled with the law firm lifestyle. Mm-hmm. We have clients who are being really, really aggressive in terms of costs, saying, gosh, we don't have a bottomless money pit here. We do have a budget that we have to work to, and stuff is getting more expensive. So how do we deal with that? Do we go in-house? In-house lawyers, as you know, have been growing for the last 20 years, and that is a new competitor that law firms have never seen. And, we see technology, as you mentioned, what this show is really about. And technology allows people to do things differently. You and I talked before the show about how easy it is now for lawyers to work at home because of all the technological items that they can use to do work that they couldn't do 10 or 15 years from now. So that's the why. So this is why we need to change, because we now have the tools that allow us to change. And really, we're looking at, in terms of what law firms are doing, and I'll stop talking in a few seconds to let us have more of a conversation rather than this is the Mitch Kowalski show. But it's really breaking into efficiency kind of innovations. How do we make more money doing the same job, right? So how do we use technology to have 3 people do work that would have taken 6 people to do before? Or is technology to create some kind of new product that we can sell to clients, that we can package and create and say to the client, you know what, you don't have to call me anymore. If you buy this service that we will update on a monthly basis, you can answer a whole slew of questions that will keep you from calling us from day to day. We'll charge you a subscription rate or whatever for that. Right. And anything bigger, bounce to us on that. So that's what we're starting to see that we didn't see 10 years ago, for sure. And even 5 years ago, we didn't see that.
I do get the sense you could talk about this a fair bit, but and I know our time's going to go by really quickly, but you hit on a couple of really key points to me. I mean, why, which is obviously the key point. I mean, to me, why is our firm using the technology we do? Because we are almost entirely paperless. We have a cloud-based practice management system. We use Google Docs instead of Microsoft Word because we can have real-time collaboration with our clients. But why do we do a lot of this stuff? A lot of it is for convenience. First of all, for our lawyers and our staff. And it's not just lawyers. We often, especially this winter with all the snow days we've had a lot of days where everybody's working at home, lawyers, staff, et cetera. But we can all get the same work done that we could get done if we were sitting here in the office. And same thing for clients. They love the convenience that when I'm out at a conference and I happen to see a client and they say, oh, I wanted to ask you something about that contract, I can whip out my phone and have the contract there and we can do some editing right there. So it's convenience on both sides. And to your point about doing things more efficiently, I mean, that's something we're seeing as well. But you touched on something at the very end there that I wanted to come back to, which is what I'm thinking of as the commoditization. So, if we're looking at things like contracts, a lot of times you can send out a questionnaire to a client, and you get all the data you need, and either someone in the firm or even using artificial intelligence, you can put together a pretty good contract that's not a generic template that's been used by 100 other companies. It is customized to that company, but it's being done far more efficiently. Are you seeing a lot more of that where things are being done either with artificial intelligence or just through the use of questionnaires as opposed to a old-fashioned face-to-face meeting followed by the junior drafting and the partner reviewing?
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that I'm seeing tons of it. It is really, honestly, again, because this is a new phenomenon. Even for the rest of your viewers who are living in a non-law firm environment, they're probably saying, gosh, we did this like 5-10 years ago, right? You guys are only doing this now? That's the reality of the law firm experience. So that kind of expert system, question-driven document preparation thing that has been around forever really is only coming into law firms in the last 2 or 3 years. Honestly, it makes a lot of sense. And it's easy for clients to do for generic clients that they do a ton of, right? I mean, the classic example is non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality agreements or something that are pretty standard. And you can build in questions that say, if this is the case, then this clause will automatically pre-populate. And if this is the case, that clause will pre-populate. That is still, sadly, in its infancy. In the legal world. But that is where we're going, particularly in certain areas, like you said, like HR is a great example, real estate's another great example, and probably there's a lot of corporate and other work that lends itself to that sort of thing. And it just makes sense from a cost perspective.
Yeah. No, and look, it depends on the client. I mean, there are some clients who will be very comfortable when you send them a document or a questionnaire and say, fill it out and send it back to us. There are some who just want to talk to somebody on the phone or come in and do it in person. So you've got to adapt to that. But I mean, look, we're looking at updating our intake process right now by having either some sort of a live chat or even some sort of a chat bot. And it's amazing what you can do. I've been researching this recently where you can have a bot and you provide the scripts. And it's not one script, right? It's a decision tree. And you might go this way or that way, but you can cover all the different variations. And what takes our current receptionist, 45 minutes or an hour to go through on the phone with someone, the client can do it at their leisure, at home in their pajamas, send it in, and we can then process it and get things moving. So that's just one other way that you can do it. But I know, and our receptionist will tell me this all the time, There are lots of people who say, no, I want to talk to a real person. So you have to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because there's almost a generational divide on that question of I want to talk to people versus people who want to just do it online. And I'll tell you a really quick story of a lawyer out in Alberta who said he was working for a millennial. And millennials, remember, ladies and gentlemen, millennials are those who are born 1980 to 2000. So the leading edge of those people are already their late 30s. So these aren't kids, right? These aren't like 22-year-olds. Like millennials are in their 30s now. And they've grown up with technology. They're used to doing a lot of stuff on technology on their phone. And so when they go to a law office for the first few times, they're going, well, I'm a little surprised that I had to go to your office. Why couldn't I have done 90% of this at home and I come in for the really important stuff? And that's what we're going to spend our time in, not, as you said, on the intake stuff where, it has to be done and it's important, but I don't have time as a client to come into your office or sit on the phone. I want to be able to do it at 9 o'clock at night when my kids are asleep and I can just bang it out. So it's that client experience, I think, that lawyers are starting to cotton on to as a differentiator in the marketplace and just really adjusting to fitting what the clients need rather than the clients fitting into how the lawyers operate.
Yeah, that's a great point. But it still does fascinate me because I know we generalize about generations and people prefer to, use the phone as opposed to the face-to-face. I'm still finding there are some younger folks who want the face-to-face, some older folks who want to use their phone. But what's been interesting to me is that we've had a lot of pushback, because a lot of clients, we work with employees and employers. So usually the first meeting, it's good to have a face-to-face. Sometimes they can't physically come to the office. So I will propose a video conference. And it amazes me how many people say, no, it's okay, I'll just call you. Whereas I think there is a value to being able to see the person's face. Similarly, like I mentioned before, we use Google Docs instead of Microsoft Word. And it's amazing how often we use Microsoft Word, period. And they expect us to. Usually once we show them what you can do, they're all over it. Or what amuses me is what often happens is we send them a Google Doc and they look at it and say, wait a minute, my kid uses that in school. And all of a sudden now it's not so foreign. And we've had a lot of clients who actually have switched away from Microsoft Word to using Google Docs in their lives and their business because it's so much more powerful in so many ways. So sometimes it's just educating people, but a lot of times there is that initial reluctance.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. It's a funny time is how I like to say it, because it is all over the map and you can make some generalizations, but there's tons of outliers. So it's hard to really stand by that generalization.
Yeah, that's very true. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. I know we talked a little bit about it offline, but one of the biggest frustrations that in my life is the do-it-yourselfers who, it's the same people who 15 years ago, if they needed an employment contract for their company, they either go back and they'd find the last contract they signed back when they were an employee, or they'll go find one from a friend. Now they'll go online and either they'll find some generic one, probably from the States, or they might go somewhere where you're buying, something that was probably vetted at some point. So they're paying money for it, but they're not following the advice on the screen and on the document, which says you should have this reviewed by an employment lawyer before you finalize it. They're just downloading it or copying it, stamping the company logo on it, having their employees sign it. And in many cases, they're realizing that it's basically not worth the paper or the digital space that it's taking. So that's my biggest concern now is it's one more way people can cut corners and cut costs, but it ends up costing them more in the end. And I'm not sure if you've given that much thought or seen that happen.
Well, I think what we as a legal profession have to understand is that, like it or not, we live in a do-it-yourself world, a DIY. I mean, that's what people do. The first thing you do when you go to the store and look at a product or you have a question about anything, even I do this, right? And lawyers will do this. If you have a legal question of an area law that it's not really part of your wheelhouse, the first thing you probably do is Google it to see which law firm has put out a memo on this. And that'll at least give you a start to then, find other things. So that's just the way we're wired now. So the real question for us as lawyers is to say, okay, that's not going away. How do we address this in a way that protects the client, doesn't cost them tons of money, and gives them a good experience and makes it worthwhile for us to spend the time to invest in it? So that's the way I look at it, is that we have to address that client need. And there are ways to do it. We talked about the expert system is probably the best way to do it. If you can package it in a way that says, look, I know you're going to do this on your own. I'm a little bit worried that you might do the wrong thing and it might come back to bite you later on. So here's what we did. Here's the package, pay us X number of dollars a month. And, you can rest assured for this body of work. And it's not going to be, everything that I do as a labor and employment lawyer, but it is a section that you can do and feel protected at a cost that's worthwhile for you and me. I think that's really in this world, that's where a good chunk of work is going to end up.
Yeah, no, I think we try to do that, and it's we're kind of learning as we go, because as you said, things are evolving so quickly. But a lot of times we'll be asked, we often pitch what I call the HR checkup. Basically, it's a review of the contracts, the policies, and procedures. So we'll review what the company has, if they have anything, and give them our recommendations. And we're usually asked for a cost estimate, and that's the type of work we love doing. And we love getting away from the billable hour. So quite happy to give cost estimates. But what I've started to realize is that it shouldn't be X dollars and we'll give you a contract. What we're really trying to package is, look, we can't just hand you the contract, because you may have the best contract in the world. You don't implement it properly, it's worthless. So it's got to be that ongoing relationship. And that's why the monthly retainer can work out really well. Or at the very least, we'll train you on how to use this, how to use a document, how to edit it down the road, how to get people to sign it so that it's actually going to be enforceable. So it's not just the document. And that's, anybody can go online and get the document. Where we provide the value really is the advice around the document. So it's making sure people understand where that value is.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason why LegalZoom has been so successful in the United States, right? And they've moved into the UK now, because that's the model. It's, we can give you some stuff that will help you, but we're always there to help you with additional work and provide that backstop. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's critical. And I mean, this isn't a new problem. I still remember when I was very early in my career and I drafted a contract for a corporate client and I sent it to them and they wrote back by email and said, yeah, the employee signed, all is good. Didn't think much of it, and then didn't talk to them again for about 2 years. And in the meantime, they'd hired 30 or 40 people. And they'd reuse the exact same contract over and over again, even though there were some specialized terms in there that were completely irrelevant to probably half of the employees. So this is not a new problem, but the onus falls on us as lawyers to educate clients as to when they should be using the DIY model and when they need to get the advice, and making clear that the product that we're selling is not that document. It's the advice that goes along with it.
100%.
Yeah. So what, I know, I've got a pretty good sense of what you do. I know you work a lot with law firms as well as in-house, but do you work, I'm curious, do you do any work with sort of what I would think of as the ultimate clients as well, or not directly?
What do you mean by the ultimate clients?
Oh, in my world, it would be HR, really.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. But it's always with the in-house team. So but part of that process is with the in-house teams is to say, look, your client is the internal people. So let's find out what their needs are. So there is some contact, but ultimately the ultimate client for me is always the in-house team, and how they can drive better value to their internal clients and how can they manage their externals.
Right. Yeah, well, and so I think there is some similarity there, because if you're working with in-house lawyers, then it's sort of like in-house HR. So some of it is probably similar in that way. So I know we're not surprisingly almost out of time, but anything else you want to comment on in terms of the evolving legal world and how it might impact HR in particular?
Sure. It's going to continue to evolve. It's not done. It's not nearly being done. It is going to continue for the rest of your lifetime and my lifetime, which means it's just more exciting. I see it as a time of opportunity, right? Because now we have a growing number of tools that allow us to do really interesting things and provide really interesting service for the clients. And I'm just wondering at what point law firms sort of merge into law and consulting on the HR and give, HR, managed services, or that kind of a model. There'll be a merging of HR lawyers with other things that are useful to HR to improve their internal capabilities, to manage cost, to manage risk, to gain some insight into the data that's coming out to them, and what does it mean from a legal perspective, and what does it mean from a business perspective. So that'll be interesting to watch to see whether or not that takes place.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because that's something that we do fairly informally. I mean, not surprisingly, I know a lot of HR people and a lot of HR consultants. And
really,
I will often tell clients, you know what, the best case scenario is you work with us and with an HR consultant. They can do a lot of the groundwork, and frankly, they can do it more cost effectively than your lawyers can. We'll do the legal review. You will have the benefit of two different sets of expertise at a better cost. So ultimately, you're going to get a great product. So we already do that informally, but I think you're right. Over time, it's going to become more formal. I often laugh because I've had it happen a few times now where clients have actually almost been apologetic. You know, when I talk to them, they'll say, "Oh, we've hired a director of HR or an HR manager," and it's almost as though they think I'm going to be offended that they're cutting me out.
Right.
And I say, no, that's great. Because now we can actually work far more cost effectively. They can do a lot of the work, and they know what you need, and they know better than just go and find some contract online and stamp your name on it. But they will go and find a good template, and we can then modify it together, which is, again, where the value comes in. So, yeah, I think you're right. There's going to be some morphing where the legal advice is going to have to merge with the non-legal advice.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of value I think people like. It's a one-stop shop kind of approach that I think. I mean, it works. There's a group called Advisor Plus in the UK that has moved to that model, and it's really interesting. Highly tech-driven, highly process-driven, and sort of merging that advice. And so I don't see any reason why it wouldn't eventually come over to North America.
Yeah, no, I think as the technology evolves and as clients become more demanding, when you said at the beginning, clients, it's not an endless bucket of money that they're willing to spend on legal fees. Even for the largest of corporations, in many cases, they have tighter controls on their budgets. So they've got to justify every dollar. And if they can find a way to do things more efficiently, they're going to. And to your point, if they can work with a team of people with different areas of expertise, as opposed to a lawyer and that's it, that's what they're going to work with. Mitch, thank you so much for joining me, and not surprising the time flew by, but that was interesting and a little bit different than most of our previous shows. I really glad you took the time.
No, happy to. It's great to have me on, and hopefully, the listeners found it interesting and engaging. Thanks very much.
Oh, I know I did. So thank you. And if people are looking to find out more about Mitch, you can go to his website, which is www.kowalski.ca. Or you can follow him on Twitter at M.E. Kowalski. Now it's my turn to fire away. All right. Well, for my chance to fire away this month, I was actually going to start by focusing on the fact that employers often misuse technology by cutting corners in order to cut costs. But I actually thought that what I'd get to is the bigger picture and the bigger issue in my world, which is the fact that companies are being, as my mother used to say, penny wise and pound foolish. And what I mean by that is employers who will save $1,000 by going and finding or reusing an old employment contract cost themselves tens of thousands of dollars in severance payments. Or employers who will save themselves $1,500 by copying a friend's non-competition clause and then losing 10 of their biggest customers when they find out that the clause that they had their best salesperson sign is unenforceable. And it's amazing to me. I've been practicing employment law for almost 20 years now. We're constantly hearing from employers about how in Canada, in Ontario in particular, the laws are so unfair, it's impossible to run a business, et cetera, et cetera. And what I always say to them is, yeah, you know what? It's true that the employment laws in Canada are designed to protect the employees. We've come a long way since the days of the Master and Servant Act. That said, there are a lot of things that employers can do to level the playing field. Most importantly, contracts, policies, procedures. Those are basically the cornerstones of the legal relationship. And make no mistake, your employment relationships, they're legal relationships. The contracts, the policies, they establish your rights, they establish your obligations, they can protect you from having employees leave and going after your customers. They can mean the difference between paying out 2 years of severance to a long-serving employee or 8 weeks of termination pay. They can help you impose discipline when employees don't follow the rules that you're attempting to put into the workplace. These are the legal documents, and you should be getting legal advice from someone who has expertise in the area of employment law. We are constantly recommending to our clients, to people we meet at conferences, to people who contact us after episodes of Fire Away, we're constantly recommending they do what I call an HR checkup, which basically means we'll review your contracts, your policies, your procedures, let you know what we recommend that you should be adding. If you don't have anything, we'll tell you what you should have. But you want to reduce your labor costs. You want to reduce your risks. You want to increase your rights as an employer. And those are all the things an HR checkup can do. It's amazing how often, though, I'm told that we don't have the budget for it now. So instead, they will rely upon old precedents that they got from a friend or they found online, or they'll go and download it. And even though the website clearly says consult an employment lawyer before implementing it, they'll just stamp the company logo on it, have somebody sign, and assume they're protected. And eventually, we'll get the call from those employers who want to enforce the contract, and they're shocked when we tell them that basically it's not worth the paper it's printed on. So, as I often tell people, I get the legal fees are expensive. This type of work, we're talking about contracts, policies. To me, that's strategic work. That's an investment. That's like insurance. It will help you avoid costs down the road. So I'm amazed when companies won't allocate resources toward them. And instead of working with an employment lawyer, they'll go out and as we talked about in season 2, episode 2 of Fire Away with Mitch Kowalski, DIY. They'll do it themselves. They'll go out and find the clauses, they'll find the contracts, and then they won't even get an employment lawyer to bless it before they have the employees sign it. And I often tell our clients, if you want to go out there and find templates, find precedents, by all means do it. But get us to review it before you finalize it, and most importantly, before you implement it. Because as I often say, you could have the best drafted contract, best drafted policy in the world. If you don't implement it properly, it's worthless. And we've seen dozens of cases in the last couple of years where termination clauses, which the company thought was going to minimize their obligations for severance, have been thrown out because the company didn't take the time, didn't spend the money to get proper legal advice to make sure that it was going to be enforceable. And when companies tell me, look, it's not in the budget now, what I usually say is, look, that's fair enough, but do you have a budget for litigation? Because what happens when this employee who signs your contract turns around and sues you for wrongful dismissal? If you didn't have $5,000 to have a good contract and a good set of policies put in place, do you have $25,000 or $50,000 for litigation? Probably not. So I guess the bottom line here is, as I said at the beginning, I see employers being penny wise and pound foolish, while at the same time, they're complaining about the fact that the laws are basically skewed against them. There's an easy way to level the playing field by having an HR checkup done, having your contracts put in place that are effective, policies that are effective. And I start off by quoting my mom. I'll now go to Benjamin Franklin. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and far less expensive, as I usually say. When you're creating the documents that will form the foundation of your legal relationship with your employees, you should work with an employment lawyer who has the expertise in that area. If you cut corners, it's eventually going to cost you a lot more than you saved. So that's my 2 cents worth, and you got it here for free. So that's all the time we have for episode 2 of season 2. I want to thank Mitch Kowalski again for joining me for a great conversation on legal technology and how it is impacting the legal profession, how clients should work with their employment lawyers or the lawyers more generally in 2019. Our next episode is going to air on Tuesday, April 16th. I'm going to be joined by Hilda Gann of People Bright Consulting. We're going to be looking at the state of issues surrounding cannabis in the workplace now that we are basically half a year into the era of legalized recreational usage. The sky, as I keep saying, the sky hasn't fallen. I've seen some incidents of misuse, of impairment at work, but not the epidemic that some people were expecting. We're going to talk about that. And in particular, we're going to start to see some bricks and mortar stores, retail stores for cannabis. What are the employment issues that arise in those situations? So that should be a really interesting discussion with Hilda coming up in a month. If you have any other questions or suggestions for future topics, feel free to email us at info@rudnerlaw.ca. Just a reminder, past episodes can always be found on YouTube, on our website, and on Facebook. And if you like us or subscribe, then you'll get notifications. Also, please keep in touch with us during the month. So check out our blog, check out our social media, sign up for the newsletter. We'd love to hear from you and make sure that you're being kept up to date. But lastly, as I always say, please remember that none of this, Fire Away, social media, the blog, none of that replaces legal advice. If you think you might need an employment lawyer, you probably do. feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. That's all for today. So thank you to Rob. Thank you to Mark and Rebecca. And again, Mitch, thank you for joining me today. Thanks to everyone for joining in, and have a great day.